Okay.
Yeah. Welcome back to the Project Gen X podcast. We have a little bit different format, sort of. Dave's not with us for this episode. But no, I got Corey in here with me again, who's been on the show before, and we're going to just talk about some shit.
Dave's not here.
Yeah, it's
wow, it's been over a year since I've been here.
On the podcast, or just it has it. I think the last time you were on was when we were talking about the tornado.
Yeah,
like
tornado,
it was right after
natural disaster.
Yeah.
So it was
March. It was
maybe
April
a week
or
after,
something.
A couple of weeks after.
Yeah, it wasn't long. Yeah, it was either in March of April of 2020, before everything went to hell.
Wow. Yeah. I haven't been here since COVID.
Yeah,
that explains.
So,
that covers it.
But I don't. Do we even have a format, really? I know we talked about maybe doing movies that
wouldn't stand.
And I didn't. Unlike normal, I will usually jot down a few things. I have a few mental notes that we can go on. I'm sure you have some as well. I can pretty much guarantee you that everything we're going to talk about is either going to be from the 70s or the 80s, which is very much in the Gen X.
Or completely random. I mean, for those of you who are listening, thank you very much.
Yes.
It's fantastic, and I listen to Alan and Dave on a regular basis. When their stuff comes out, I press play, and it's usually what puts me to sleep at night.
Oh, there you go.
In all seriousness, that hour before bed is usually my only downtime during the day. And
I have podcasts that I listen to when I'm going to bed at night,
absolutely.
And not because it's like, oh, this will put me out. It's like, no, this is where I'm decompressing. I'm just laying back and listening, and that's it. So
decompress, breathe, listen, and then by the time we're done, it's time to
absolutely.
For those of you who don't know or don't remember the last time I was here, Alan and I have known each other going on 30 years, just shy of it.
I've known you about a year longer than I've known Dave, and you've known Dave a lot longer than I have.
Yeah, Dave and I were in high school together.
Yeah,
I was there when he was the new kid in school, and was a young, nerdy-looking, large, misunderstood drummer.
And now he's an old, nerdy-looking, misunderstood drummer.
Yeah, pretty much. He's worked hard to grow, and the only thing that's changed is his age.
Yeah, pretty much. It's
and it's such an interesting relationship between the three of us. The dynamic, and I think I've said this before. I don't know if we were recording when I said it.
Who knows? Yeah.
There's no telling. But the interesting dynamic is. I've known Dave longer than I've known Alan, but all three of us met each other separately.
Mm-hmm.
So it's never been, Corey's friend Dave that he introduced to Alan, and sometimes with three Type A personalities, you have, that one person that's still sort of on the outside because they were brought in by someone else. No, we all met each other honestly on our own, and so the dynamic is intense, whichever combination you put together. And if you put all three of us together, to me, it's just in terms of a friendship, in terms of, when we recorded together over a year ago, it's something that's really magic to me.
Yeah. And just so everyone knows that anytime that we get together and whatever, whether it's me and Corey or it's me and Dave or it's, all three of us together, I'm always the smart ass. So
I'm sort of I think we've decided that I'm sort of the middle ground between Alan and Dave. I'm every bit as cynical and sarcastic as Alan is, although I might be a little bit, I have some of that being reserved that Dave tends to exhibit. And so, with that...
Sorry, you have to stay in that microphone.
Yeah.
It's a matter of fact. Keep talking.
And so with that, having Dave sort of be reserved, me sitting in the middle, and Adam. I don't know why I've been doing that. Pause.
No.
Something for edit.
No, what are you talking about? You've listened to the show. I hardly ever edit.
That's worth editing. But it makes for an interesting dynamic between the three of us. And I enjoy it immensely, whether, we're recording or sitting in Waffle House or
wherever.
Or wherever. And I always feel sorry for the waitresses. because
Well-
we play hard. We warn them, but
Yeah,
you know,
but it's-
we invite them into the trap, and they fall for it every
They
time.
always say, "Oh, don't worry, I can take it." And it's like, oh, honey, you know.
Thank
no.
you. Thank you for allowing me to take the gloves off.
Yeah. Kind of like hers tonight. You know, she kind of.
She's like, oh
She's
yeah,
like, oh yeah. She's cracking jokes and stuff. By the time it was over, she was like, "Here's your bill."
here's your bill. Yeah, I'm gonna go reconsider everything in my life. And I'm not sure if she's gonna go to church more, or if she's gonna do more drugs.
Could be both down here.
At
So
the
it's
same time. So again, fair warning. Alan and I have a tendency to talk about one thing, and by the end of the episode, we will have covered 30 things.
Yeah, well, that's that. Dave and I do that
you know,
some as well.
We could talk about movies and end up talking about, dating history.
Oh God, no, man.
Because I missed out on all those episodes.
Let's not talk about that at this point.
Well,
so.
we've heard all of your stories.
Well, no.
We've heard most of your stories.
Believe me,
we've heard the ones that with proper wording might be able to be mentioned within 100 miles of a church.
Well, let's put it this way: there's still.
But we haven't heard any of mine.
I'm pretty open about a lot of stuff in my life. Probably more so than some people care to know, but it's still one of those things where I haven't gotten into some certain things because there's still the off chance that one of my family members might listen to this. And I've already brought enough shame on my family that we don't want to just push them over the edge. So.
And there's also the off chance that like an ex might hear this,
and there's that also. Yeah.
There's a problem there. Fortunately, we haven't gone into mine, any of mine, which typically results at the very end of what just happened.
I've been putting together another, and I've talked about it a little bit on other episodes, but I've been putting together another show that I've tentatively called "Women I Love." Parentheses D, close parentheses, of, like talking to like my friends and maybe even some family members, but I'm actually going to reach out to some exes as well. And I don't know if it will be Chevy Chase comedy roast or if it will be cathartic in some way, so it's like
there's even a small chance that it could turn into a guidebook of what not to do.
Well, a friend.
I've been around you. I've been around a lot of your exes.
Well, a friend of mine was just dealing.
I even talked to some of them still.
Yeah, I know. A friend of mine was just recently dealing with I guess they're broken up. I don't know. I don't know at this point.
Oh, no, I'm divorced.
No, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about a different friend. I have other friends besides you and Dave, okay?
I don't believe it.
And she's a lot better looking than either one of you. So
introduce us.
Yeah. But I was talking to her, and she was kind of, ranting to me about the boyfriend, and this and that and everything. And like literally for like a full solid day, I'm telling her, this is what's going to happen. This is blah, 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 blah. And she got down to the end and she's like, how do you know all this? Is like, because I've been this guy. Like I know the bad boyfriend playbook forward and backwards. Okay, this is what happens, And she was like, "Oh, it's so nice that you know this stuff." I'm like, I've got plenty of exes that'll tell you otherwise. So it's.
I used to refer to Alan as, quote, my own personal Charlie Sheen.
Yes.
End quote. And
I wasn't quite as bad as him, but I had my moments.
No tiger's blood, no winning, but everything else is pretty much the same.
What's funny about the whole winning conversation is that I sat there and watched that when it happened. I saw it. I didn't watch it live, but I heard about it, so I went and watched it on YouTube. And I'm sitting there going, God, I was like this close to saying those exact same words on many occasions, you know?
You really were.
And so it was kind of one of those things of watching that, and, you know, with my own history of substance abuse and mental health issues. And I recognize, like, no, this is more of a mental health thing than it is the actual substance. The substance abuse is just the way he's dealing with the mental health issues.
Augmented.
Right. And you get the right combination of those two things. And he actually, I have no doubt that he believed everything he said in that conversation,
I'm
because I would have
certain.
also. I mean, it just, you know, and, you know, that was been 10 years ago, over 10 years ago now, and he's still kicking. So, I mean, good for him. But
he's still kicking.
Yeah.
With HIV.
Well, yeah.
But, yeah,
and,
you know.
And I'm sure plenty of other stuff as well. I mean, but it's like, but, you know.
Not enough Ajax.
Charlie Sheen, man, he, yeah.
What else is there to say? You just
I
say
know.
Charlie
I mean, it's
Sheen,
Charlie
and everybody shrugs their shoulders and goes,
you know,
yeah,
you know, that's
Charlie.
That's kind of where we are, you know. It's yep. So, anyways, we promised we do kind of have a topic. We were just Corey actually brought this up. Said, why don't we talk about movies that couldn't get made today? And
yeah, there's so many.
I'm like, well, there are a ton of those, and like I said, most of them will probably be from the 70s and 80s.
Yep.
There's a few of them that might get into, because there was one of them in particular we were talking about.
Yeah. So keep in mind that we're talking about. We're not talking about cancel culture.
No,
you know, we're not getting into the sort
we're not
of the
getting
political
into the politics
or
of
the
it,
PC end
or
of it.
the right and wrong of it, or any of that kind of stuff. And also, we're not making apologies for anything that we're going to talk about here. All that we will say, and I know Corey feels the same way, is it was a different time.
It was absolutely a different time.
And that doesn't mean that it was a worse time or that it was a better time. It was just a different time. And, you know, there are... Well, let's just jump in. The first one I'm going to go to is Revenge of the Nerds. Okay?
Oh, wow. A whole series.
Well, but I'm only going with the first one here.
Okay.
Because I'll be honest, I have not seen the second one, and I've seen bits and pieces of one of the later ones, like that they made, like where they tried to bring back a bunch of, like they brought back Carradine, and they brought back Ted McGinley, and you know, and that kind of stuff. And it's like, you really shouldn't have done this, you know. But that first movie, first off, society's views of what is nerdy has changed quite a bit.
It's almost 180 degrees.
Yeah,
it
kind
really
of.
Is. The jock is kind of the nerd now in the sense because they're not not as in tune to society as a whole because they're focused on their one thing.
Right.
They're focused on the game or whatever.
It comes down to, I guess this is where we are. We get a little political. In this day and age, with participation trophies and with safe spaces and
puppy breaks.
I mean, all that kind of stuff. It's like,
which is not a bad idea.
Yeah,
honestly,
I'm all for a puppy break, man.
Puppy
I think every business should have a dog. Like, that just wanders around, and just like goes up to random cubicles or whatever, and just like comes in and lays down, or
just a mascot.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. I think that my dog Biscuit would be wonderful for that. He would go around all day and find somebody.
Hi there.
Yeah,
can you pet me?
I'll come in here now. I'll come in here and love on you. Yes, you can love on me. Okay, now I got to go over this next one. Here I go. Just like all day. That's what he would do.
Don't worry, there's enough of me to go around.
Yeah, I mean, he just all day long. But it's the idea, the idea of the nerdy outcast, still, that trope still exists, and you see it,
but it's very limited.
And it's also one of those things where and I think this movie started where, like, this is where they get their comeuppance. Like it's you get like like The Big Bang Theory. We get 11 or 12 seasons of a show that's all around
based around a bunch of nerds,
right? And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, this is cool, and I enjoyed that show. I've seen every episode,
So at some point in my, lower education career, and it felt like a career. I should get a retirement. But part of the reason I feel that way is because for a certain period of that time, I was very much that. I was very quiet. I kept to myself. I was, I did not have any kind of. I was not a Type A personality.
Right.
I was not an extrovert. So, I got all of the nerd, and the jock walking down the hallway, and I was in the band. So not only was I a nerd, I was a band nerd.
Yeah.
So, I played the coolest band instrument, saxophone, because back then that was cool.
There's
not now, but
there's not a cool band instrument. It's maybe drums, maybe.
Shut up! Don't say that. Dave's going to listen to this.
I said maybe.
All right, fair enough.
The rest of them not cool.
But I had to deal with that stigma,
Right.
and it in that.
And I say
period
that
of
as
time,
someone who played trumpet, so I mean that's
And at that time, that stigma was typically an attraction to those who were perhaps a little less heartless. The bullies would look for those guys because they were typically viewed as weaker, smaller, not go-getters. All the things that attract someone to try and needle you.
Right.
And what I like about even fast forward, go from say 1989 when all that stuff was a very commonplace thing, and Revenge of the Nerds had maybe been out for a few years.
Yeah, it came out 84, 85,
something like
right
that.
In there, yeah.
So 5 years old, it hasn't really hit mainstream yet. In some ways, everybody's seen it. Yeah, it was a great movie. Nerds get their comeuppance, but in the real world, that the rules of that movie don't apply in real life.
Right.
So you fast forward from 1989 to when The Big Bang Theory comes out, and a lot of things that happened in between.
Big Bang Theory came out in 2007.
Okay,
so I mean you're 20 years later.
So,
yeah,
20 years
Revenge
later.
of the Nerds was 84. Yeah.
In 20 years, roughly, in 2 decades, enough had happened in between, and the Big Bang Theory, I think, was really the sort of the crowning moment of normalizing that sort of nerd archetype.
Right.
And it became popular.
Well, you have to remember who was writing all this stuff.
Which is ironic.
I know.
Though,
I mean,
because to be a nerd 20 years ago, or now
it's 40
now
years
40
ago.
years
I know.
ago, to be a nerd then was synonymous with grossly unpopular,
right.
least popular.
Right.
And 20 years later, it becomes a type of popular. So being the unpopular nerd, ironically, becomes a popular setting that people started to emulate. People started to look at nerds differently.
Kind of. And I'll tell you, we're going to get off on this. It's kind of like, so, yeah, I've said before, it was one of those things that I was in junior high school, like 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade. I think it was probably 7th grade, when someone told me that I was one of the nerds. And I was like,
really?
I am? And they were like, yeah, I mean, look at the people you hang around with.
I've seen your picture from high school.
Well, no, I'm talking about, this is like junior high.
Yeah, I know. But
and it was like,
if your high school picture was that bad.
Fuck off. But it was one of those things where it was like, I sit there and I like, it was one of those things I got thinking about it, and like, as time went on, I really thinking about it, I was like, oh yeah, we were the group that like played video games.
Yeah, the outcasts.
And we weren't really outcasts, though. That's the whole thing. That's why I never considered myself to be in that group until someone told me, because it's like, I knew we weren't the popular kids, but I just thought we were kind of somewhere in the middle, it kind of thing. But it was, we read comic books, we played video games, myself wasn't one, but a couple of the guys that I hung out with were really into computers at a time before computers were really big, and I never played Dungeons and Dragons, but I had friends who played Dungeons and Dragons, and all that kind of, loved sci-fi and, and all that, but never really put those together as like, I'm a nerd. Now that doesn't make any sense, because the thing is that I played sports. It was kind of one of those things where it was like, okay, again, I wasn't the best person that was on the team, but I was a solid player, any sport that I got involved with, And so it was kind of one of those things where it was like, again, I know I'm not one of the jocks. I know I'm not one of the popular kids, but I never consider myself to be a nerd, you know.
From my perspective, you would have been sort of that middle ground guy,
Mm-hmm.
you know, kind of like you were thinking.
Well, with that, where I'm going to is once I get into high school, and it's one of those things of being that middle ground person, and still in high school, still reading comic books when everybody else who used to read comics that had stopped, and still playing a lot of video games where a lot of other people had stopped. You know, that was something their little brother was doing. They weren't, you know, or at least they said they weren't.
Yeah, that's something little boys do.
Yeah, whatever.
I'm not a little boy anymore.
Crap, you know, or you know, and of course, you know, everybody went and saw Terminator 2 that summer between junior and senior year. So hey, there's your sci-fi right there. So biggest movie of the fucking year. So why are you giving me, you know, there's all that kind of stuff. But here's the thing, is that I was also a metalhead in all of that, you know, and I'd really got into music, started playing guitar, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And so all of a sudden, as we're rolling into my senior year of high school, the stuff that I listened to started getting really popular. So now all of a sudden it's like, hey,
done that,
guys. And I wasn't one of those like, oh, screw Metallica, the Black Album. I was like, no, I like the Black Album, you know. It was like, it was just as good to me as the rest of their stuff, you know. But it was just kind of one of those like, oh, I'm glad to see everybody else is caught up with us, you know. It's just like,
and that's something you and Dave have in common, because Dave definitely, you know, a metalhead.
Right,
you know,
and you know, and then
period.
going into that happened, then Nirvana happened, you know, and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, this is stuff I've been listening to for a while. This is not just this is the next new thing, and everybody's jumping on it. It's like, yeah, welcome to the party, guys. You know,
we've been waiting.
Yeah, and then it's the whole. So, are you the bigger person here, or what? You know, and me, I didn't care. I mean, I've always been. Okay, I take that back. I haven't always been life of the party, but especially by the time my senior year rolled around in high school, I was like, dude, I am seriously treading water from now until May. I'm ready to get the F out of here, and nobody's going to ruin my party, you know, type thing. So it was kind of one of those things like, all right, fine. Everybody jump in the pool. It's fine.
Yeah, you kind of hit this, you know, this, you know what, it's time for me to do my thing.
Exactly.
And I don't care what anybody else thinks about it.
I had friends that I'd been friends with for a long time who didn't like that because all of a sudden I'm breaking away from the pack.
Yeah,
you know,
you're not being controlled.
Exactly. And then, you know, then there were enough of the other people who, hey, you don't belong in our group. Well, screw you. You don't belong in my group. You know, this is the... Are we going to have a pissing contest here? Because
you took a real bulldog approach to it.
I did, you know. But again, it was one of those things. I was never like, screw you, you know, whatever. But it was still one of those things whenever somebody, you know... Because high school is such a weird, like... And nobody was ever bullied me whatsoever. Because I was just too much of a smart ass for that to happen. I mean, again, I mean, I'm no tall person now, and I especially wasn't when I was in high school, you know. I mean, granted, I only grew like another inch or so between the end of high school and whenever I was in college, but it was still one of those things where it was like, people just did not mess with me and a few other people, you know, like my friend, my Pastor Dave, you know, like, you know, we graduated together, and another one, nobody messed with that guy.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just kind of one that's like, all right, you know, which again goes back to the whole... He turned out to be a pastor and a police officer, and I'm just like,
it's crazy,
you know. But it's just like, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, all of a sudden people were coming to the party, and it was like, all right, fine, let them in, you know.
Yeah, the more the merrier.
The more the merrier.
That point.
But that was when you saw all of a sudden the captain of the football team is really into punk rock, who had never been into punk rock before, because now all of a sudden punk's
cool. But now it's cool.
And so now that's
we got to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. Or whatever, you know, insert whatever. And so over a 20 or 25 year period, you see that where Hollywood, and I've said this so many times, of people are, oh, nerd, you know, the geeks inherited the earth was like the big thing that came, you know, especially in the mid 2000s, whenever like all of a sudden like everything that's on the television or on TV or on the movie screen is geek oriented, you know. And I say that, you know, comic books or video games or whatever, blah blah.
And all the really pretty girls wore glasses.
I know, exactly.
And, you know,
but it's one of those things where it's like, I've been saying since day one of all that is like, we didn't win anything.
No.
They bought us out is what
Yeah.
happened. They are, it's like
They found an untapped market to exploit.
exactly.
And we let them.
And they're still exploiting it.
And we
still
bought into it.
And that's why you get a lot of angry nerds,
Yeah.
like, well, and I feel that a little bit because, again, in the early 90s, like, I remember Anthrax especially being really big about, like, slapping, like, like X-Men stickers on their guitars and stuff, because Scott Ian's a huge nerd. I mean, that's, it's like, oh, that's really cool. And then all of a sudden, people are like, oh, yeah, the X-Men are cool. Like, you don't even know who the fucking X-Men are. It's like...
If I said Colossus,
right.
you would be thinking the Thing from Fantastic Four.
Right, yeah, exactly. And it's also a...
And there are people right now scratching their heads going,
I know.
What's the difference?
I know. And it's one of those things where it was irritating on a certain level. On another certain level, I'm been happy to see it happen, because I'm like, oh no, I'm glad that people finally caught up to everything else. But at the same time, I also understand the whole, when I was that age, when I was a teenager, this was something you didn't talk about. Not only was it something you didn't talk about, you didn't let the people know about it because it could get you ridicule.
Yeah.
Plus the fact, if you want to know what happened in X-Men number 100, you either have to scrape together the money to go buy one of those, or hope that the library has a collection of it, which collections were not a big thing at the time. Or maybe you knew it had an older cousin or something that maybe had a few of them laying around that would let you borrow them to read.
And you might be able to at least piece it together.
You had to, like, work to get all this stuff. And now I go to buy my 7-year-old son clothes, and I'm like, I want one of these T-shirts.
Yeah, all we had was underoos.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing.
And that was all DC.
You couldn't go and like buy an X-Men T-shirt. I keep going with the X, or a Spider-Man T-shirt for yourself when you were a teenager, because they didn't exist.
They didn't make them, yeah.
And if you did find them, you had to special order them, like from somebody across the country or something, some comic book shop or whatever. And then if you come rolling up in one,
my favorite was, it's not exactly comic books, but it's part of the era, especially in the early 80s, is the planet with the rocket in the circle, the rocket trail going around it, the Lego emblem.
Oh,
the Lego space emblem.
Yeah.
God, if they had one of those T-shirts when I was a kid,
right,
I would have made my mom buy like 5 of them.
I know.
She's going to buy a kid's small, a kid's medium, a kid's large, and then an adult medium, and
it goes even beyond
all the
that.
way up to the 2X I need now.
It goes even beyond that, and I mean, like, shirts with skulls and guitars and different stuff on it. It's like, no, you couldn't just
or the
go
Punisher.
But I'm talking about just like generic rock stuff or whatever. It's like you couldn't just go to Walmart in the 80s or even into the 90s buy something like that.
And then you get into the late 90s and the early 2000s, and you're talking about
everywhere.
About being bought out. You got the little girly skulls with the ribbon on
pigtails.
top.
Yeah, they got pigtails, and
I'm a punk girl.
I know.
And I'm like, you have no idea.
I know. Thank you, Hot Topic.
You people have never even heard of a mosh pit. I
know. It's like, and again, it's that whole. We're old enough to. You and I are old enough to remember when punk music was scaring the bejesus out of Middle America.
Oh God!
Even though we didn't listen to it so much, because
I mean, churches. If your church found out that you were listening to it, that. Even if they didn't believe in performing exorcisms, they would have figured out a way to do one.
It's so funny because, like, the first time my mom heard the Ramones, it was in the mid-90s somewhere. I was listening to them one day.
A little late, but okay.
but it was one of those things that, again, I came to them like in high school, but I didn't really get into them until I was like in college.
Sure.
And so it's like, we're talking about the early we're talking about like 93, 94,
about
somewhere
the time
around
we
in there.
Met, actually.
Yeah, and so I'm listening to it. My mom comes in, she's like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "This is Ramones." She's like, "I really like this. This is kind of cool." I was like, "You do realize this is that punk rock music that you've been scared of for all these years, right?" And she's like, "Really?" I'm like, yeah. It's like,
sorry, Ma.
I know. But it's just kind of one of those things, and And, now, granted, I could have played her some other punk music that would have really, scared the bejesus out of her.
You could have played her some Anthrax.
Well, believe me, they heard all that when I was in high school because I used to play it in my room all the time.
Or, Sex Pistols.
Sex Pistols would have done it. That was... most definitely. But anyways, back to the
kind
Revenge
of the
of the
nerd
Nerds.
thing.
So, anyways...
Right before we get to that, though,
okay.
Sorry. One of the things that it's this love-hate thing about the sort of the marketing and the normalization of sort of the nerd culture is when I was a nerd, I literally bled for it. I did face bullies, so much so that when I finally came out of my shell and did things like join the Army, go into law enforcement, things like that, I have become that sort of advocate for the bully. If I see it anywhere, even at my job, if I see one coworker like kind of bullying another coworker, I will maybe not forcefully interject into that, but I'll interject enough just to change the subject, to get the person off the hook and get the other person distracted. Right. And because such is my reputation based on performance now that I don't get bullied. And but I'm mad at the normalization of it because I bled for it. Right. It's sort of that jealousy. If it were normalized when I was in the middle of it, then I wouldn't have had to face that. I didn't care about the popularity aspect. I cared about the, me and others not getting this kind of negative treatment from sort of uneducated, ignorant alpha males. I became an alpha male in my own right. I earned it. I put myself in situations where I had to adjust and became that. But because
you'll always be my bitch. So
as long as you keep paying me. Stop it. But on the same time, I'm glad it is. At the same time, I'm glad it is normalized because I feel like, and I don't have any science to back this up.
Right.
We're not here talking about science. We're just talking about how
we weren't those nerds.
There's three stages of nerds to me in terms of either not normalized or normalized. The not normalized is obviously what I said when I was one, and we all just kind of put up with it. We accepted it. We took it. We took the punches and just kept our mouths shut and went home. We didn't tell anybody because that would make it 10 times worse. And it's a horrible, 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 horrible thing to go into. Culturally, I think the nerd group sort of fighting back really kind of went a negative direction 10 years after I was going through it. And I think about an extremely serious conversation, and not to bring everybody down talking about this, but Columbine High School had just happened, and I remember that was, in my opinion, that was two nerds who had been really chewed and really kind of pushed around too much and pushed past their limits.
Right.
And they'd finally had enough, and they snapped, and they agreed, if hey, this is going to happen to us anyway, so we could either stop it now and face the same result and make a statement doing it, or we can just let this continue and we can die inside slowly.
The thing with that is that when that first happened, as reporting started coming out in the days afterwards, it was kind of one of those things where it was like, I never sided with Eric Harris and Dylan Klebo by any stretch of the imagination. But I was like, I bet those kids were bullied. And come to find out they were. And
they were a lot.
The problem, though, is that Eric Harris was a undiagnosed psychopath.
Oh, yeah,
and
absolutely.
He absolutely manipulated more. I guarantee you that Klebo had his own mental things going on, but he found someone who was like, okay, sure, let's go do this.
Yeah, there was sort of a dom sub. So I've
kind of got moved away from this is the nerdy kids that are exacting some kind of revenge, and into they were just looking for an excuse to do this.
Well, it was the nerdy kids thing, and I tend to look at it as all the people that really singled them out. They just
they did have a quote unquote hit list of people that they went after specifically. But
by fate or however you want to cut that, the ones that singled them out, they picked the wrong two kids. I'm not saying they got what they deserved.
No.
I'm not saying anybody got what they deserved. But, if there's something that's really hot and you stick your hand in it, you get burned.
Mm-hmm.
And so and this is an age-old argument, but the thing that really resonated with me about that is not what happened, not the news coverage, not anything, but it was how I felt.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was one thing about it that resonated with me, and I felt guilty about it for a while. So much so that I got to hit a point of denial, because there was a part of me that understood what they were going through.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a part of me that was like, I know it's wrong, but I'm glad it happened. Now, for any of you out there that are listening to that and think I'm glad that a bunch of people got killed and injured and the rest of their lives changed, if you think that, you're wrong. You couldn't be any more wrong, because it's a horrible thing. But that little part that's in everybody's heart, I don't care how good you are, I don't care how bad you are, there's a little bit of your heart that chases revenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't agree with it. I thought it was wrong, but I could also close my eyes and see that happening, and the faces that it was happening to are the people that did it to me.
Mm-hmm.
Then I hit a point of denial. And then there was this one day where Alan and I were sitting in Waffle House, and I was mad about it. It was a day later. It was a day after. I went through that whole range of emotions in a 24-hour period. And we're sitting at Waffle House drinking coffee, and that topic comes up, and I'm like, man, you know what? I don't understand kids like that. I mean, they could have asked for help. They could have done all this stuff. We didn't have any kids like that at our school. And Alan looks at me and says,
Corey, we were those kids.
And I went, shit, you're right.
Yeah. And,
we were.
And I said the same thing.
The difference is we had a moral structure.
Right.
Based on our families being involved in our lives, and I think really that's the only resonant difference.
I said the same thing about the West Memphis Three.
Yeah,
I remember
them too.
I remember watching that first Paradise Lost. I remember when it happened. The whole West Memphis, all
Mm-hmm.
that and everything, and especially after watching that first Paradise Lost movie or documentary and sitting there and thinking. I remember at the end of it, sitting there watching, going, "Those are the kids I would have hung out with."
Yeah.
Like, I would be guilty by association.
Oh, absolutely.
And I never once thought they were guilty.
And I very well could have been one of the ones that was sucked in.
Exactly. And that's the whole thing. It's like, I very well could be one of those kids.
Yeah.
Just because I wore black and I listened to heavy metal and,
I wore a long jacket.
Yeah, and it was, I was going to a private Christian school, so obviously this is the person who did it, because he's different than everyone else, know? And so, I get that. But, yeah, it is. It's...
But that's a lot on why Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah. Half an hour later, we're coming back to Revenge of the Nerds.
We just took a great comedy movie and made it as dark as you could.
Okay, look. All right, here's...
I thought it was funny. Now, my mom was pretty liberal. My dad was not in the house. So if it was a horror movie or if it had... a moderate amount of nudity.
Right.
She did not hide me from that stuff. I was exposed to that stuff at a very early age, and I did turn out mostly normal. On a good day with medication.
As I was saying, the medications or the meds are right now. You and I both. It's
but mostly normal. And yes, Alan's discussed them, so I have off air, but I have some mental challenges as well. I have some personality disorders. I do suffer from depression. Maybe
welcome to Gen X.
maybe some mild bipolar. It's not like I'm running around cleaning the house and then I'm angry at everybody and sleeping for 6 days. It's not quite that extreme, but I do have my moments. I do really well during the peaks, and then the troughs come.
The valleys hit, and it's like, oh,
and then I call Alan and say, man, I want to hang out.
Yeah, and I make fun of him for a couple hours, and he feels
funny
better.
because he makes fun of me, and I feel great.
You're still living in your trauma.
Well, if you don't get out of it, it doesn't seem like trauma, But I have my challenges. I also, because of choice of careers and things like that, I suffer from PTSD, and believe me, combining all of those things, that's a movie.
It's also how you make a serial killer. So
but at least I would be a serial killer with a conscience.
Well, there you go. He'd be like Dexter.
Yeah.
I only kill the bad guys.
So, but it's interesting. I think of all the generations, Gen X. This is a Gen X show, so shout out to all of us Gen Xers. If we have one ability, all of us, even despite the shortcomings that we have, if we have one ability, is that we know how to survive.
Right.
Because we raised ourselves. I love my mom. I miss her. My mom passed a few years ago, 4 years ago, this past June 29th. And I will miss her for every day. She was a great mom. But she had to work. Single mom. I come home from school, I'm by myself. I'm left to my own devices. It's amazing I didn't burn the house down with me in it. But we learned how to survive. We developed our own coping strategies.
Right.
We, some of them not so great. But
we definitely learned gallows humor.
Yeah.
That was,
my gallows humor is not just because I served in the military. It's not because I've seen people die. It's not because I served as a police officer on top of that and saw other people die. It's not because I worked in emergency management where I get state statistics on how many people died during an event. It's not because of all of that. Well, it is. But it's not just because of all of that. I already had a really solid foundation for that, just being because I was born in 1974.
Exactly.
So the next movie that came up when let
me go to the Revenge of the Nerds here. Here's the reason.
Nerds.
Well, because we never really talked about the movie.
There were boobies in that movie.
There were, but there's also a really icky rape scene in that movie.
You're right.
Yeah, and that's the thing that has been. I remember seeing that movie when it had been out a few years, and I saw it on television. Like I saw the television version of it because my parents were not going to let me watch it.
Yeah, God no.
And I remember
my mom
even
shouldn't have
then,
let me watch it.
And I remember even then when that whole thing happens. Whenever he puts on the Darth Vader
mask
and goes in, and she thinks it's her boyfriend, and
it's
I was
not.
like, this isn't right. Like that's and again, I was a young teen. I mean, I was maybe 13, 14 years, maybe 14, the oldest when I saw it.
So I was
just like,
I was a little bit younger when I saw
it.
I saw it when it first came out on HBO. Back when
right. Oh yeah,
cable
HBO,
dials weren't digital.
Right,
they were analog.
I know you had like a little turn.
And but I told you we're old.
But it was one of those things that so many people that I know in our age group talk about that movie like, oh, it's so great and everything, and I always bring. I was like, so you're okay with the rape scene? What are you talking about? Scene? But the thing is that the way that movie plays is that it's okay.
It's real soft.
But it's okay because all of a sudden she decides she's in love with him.
Yeah,
and it's like, no, that's not okay at all.
And there's no woman on the face of this earth that would have that reaction.
None. Well, that's not true. If they had the reaction, though, it's because of probably past trauma, and so therefore they, we get a whole lot of the psychology of this.
I can see
they
that.
keep going back to their abusers because type stuff. But yeah, and that's one of those like, I just like,
see, I was a little bit younger when I saw it, and so that never really resonated with me. I think I picked that up on like something again because we were raised on the tube.
Right. And like I said, I saw the edited version of it.
We'll say, oh, I haven't seen that movie in years. Let me see if I can go find that and we can go play it. And I remembered playing it. And, this was probably 10 years ago. It'd been,
right.
Been almost 30 years since that movie came out. And
the first time I saw
and
Porky's,
I played it, and then I saw that, and I just went, oh.
Yeah. The first time I saw Porky's, I was like 27 or 28. Like, I never saw it back. Of course, I'd heard all about it and stuff. And I watched it, and I was like, this is not as funny as everybody said it was.
At the earliest that I saw it, I may not have been through puberty all the way. So,
see,
I was never sheltered from that stuff.
So many people I know saw all those movies when we were in like grade school, and junior high and stuff. And a lot of them I did not see until I was an adult. For partly because it was one of those things, my parents were really strict about that kind of stuff.
But also think of it this way. Think about how much you've achieved. You didn't see this stuff until you were an adult, and you're this messed up.
Oh, I know. I found my trauma somewhere else.
It's fantastic.
I commend you. I was traumatized by being exposed to sex at such an early age. I was traumatized by being told that sex was going to kill me from a very early age, or send me to hell, I should say. So it was like, so it's a completely different type of trauma.
I will say, looking at that perspective as the metric
explains a lot, doesn't it?
And as a Christian, I'm gonna say, sounds like a fun place.
Yeah, it's
save me a seat.
As I say, I figure I'm going to know a lot of people there, so it's like,
yeah. But at least we'll be together.
Yeah, well, It's, but anyway, so we won't get into our eternal resting places.
That's another
that's
episode.
A whole
right
other
there.
episode in and of itself. But Revenge of the Nerds is definitely, and there's been a couple of remake talks about it, and I'm like, you would have to do something. And also, one of the other things is the fact, they broke into the sorority house and they put up cameras, so therefore, they're watching people against their will. There's plenty of stuff that's kind of problematic in it.
Creepy as it may sound, one of my favorite scenes.
Oh, I know. We've got Bush. We've got Bush. But
and when I was in high school and junior high, we actually had a booger.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Everybody called him Booger.
Okay, there you go.
I even called him Booger, and I was as nerdy as he was, and that was probably wrong of me. So,
and the whole thing is Curtis Armstrong made a career off of that one role.
If you know who I am, and your nickname used to be Booger,
yeah,
and you're listening to this,
sorry,
dude, I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
I wasn't mean to a lot of people, but apparently I was mean to you. Yeah. And lesson learned.
Well, another 80s movie, and I don't know if you'll remember this one. Do you remember the movie Johnny Be Good?
I do remember the movie Johnny Be Good, but before we get to yours, I want to pick one.
Okay.
Is one I brought up in the car earlier today while we were going to eat, and that is Under the Rainbow.
Okay. I have not seen this movie in probably since it was somewhere around the time it was released.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, this is a supposed true story of the hotel that they put up all of the little people. They housed them there when they were
filming The Wizard of Oz.
And the stories of the drunken debauchery have been greatly exaggerated over time, and especially in this movie.
But circus-like insanity.
Yes.
And sometimes loving. It's.
Yeah.
It's. I envision this movie, what I remember of it. It's been a long time since I've seen it too, but I envision this movie that all of these things in this movie is pretty much what is playing inside Deadpool's head as background all the time.
I could see that.
It may have even become sort of an abstract inspiration for the creation of Deadpool. But yeah, it's a movie. It's a comedic movie, and it obviously Hollywood exaggerated movie about, like you said, all the debauchery that took place in this hotel.
And they poke a lot of fun at little people.
And there's a lot of short jokes.
Just on and on and on.
And of course, by today's standards, that's we call them little people,
right?
Which to me, honestly,
they use the word midget quite a bit back then.
Midget is a common term of the time,
right?
And honestly, I got to tell you, I don't necessarily feel a positive or negative connotation to the word midget, but when I say little people, it sounds so condescending to me. And if you'll please pardon the pun, it sounds like I'm talking down to you, and that's horrible for me to laugh at. It's horrible for me to say it. But
it's kind of one of those things where nomenclature has changed so many times over the years for different groups. My grandmother used a particular word for black people.
Yep.
That's not even. My grandmother didn't use the N-word. Okay, I'm just going ahead and say that right now. But she said colored. That was the whole.
Oh, my grandfather used the N-word.
Well, yeah. Plenty of family members that use the N-word and would act like it was just no. That's what they want to be called. Like that's and we've seen in our lifetime it go from that to Negro because you had the NAACP, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. That's what that stands for. Then you had the United Negro College Fund, right? Yeah. And then we've seen it go from that to no, we want to be called black. And then it went from that to we want to be called African American, and now we want to be people of color. And it's like, okay, I understand. Some people kind of get stuck in this is what we always said, and this is what was acceptable at one time, and it's like, well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's acceptable today. But we've gone through that with so many different, I know it keeps falling. That's because there you go. Actually, you're probably going to need to like shorten that. That's the reason why it's doing it, because it's heavy. It's not balanced on the other end. You can just move the whole thing over.
I know it's too big.
Has anyone ever said that to you?
Hang on, I'm thinking. Anyway, I'm gonna have to get back to you on that.
And I'm not. I mean, because it's one of those things where I'm like, look, I'm all about inclusion. Whatever, Just let me know. It's almost getting to the point
out
now.
A memo. Let me know what I'm supposed to call you.
Give me the list of accepted terms.
I'm not going to make fun of you, but I am going to make fun of what you expect me to call you.
Well, I'm going to make fun of the white liberals. Is what I'm going to make fun of.
Yeah, because they're the ones that come up with all the
names and tell people that are Hispanic that they have to be called Latinx now, and it's like. It's falling again. And that kind of stuff.
I hear there's medication for this.
Yeah, I know. It's a
for what you guys aren't seeing, we're seeing it. My microphone keeps drooping.
Yes.
And that's not a euphemism.
Yeah, it's
at least not today.
But hold on. And we're back. We had to take a little microphone maintenance time there. So
droopage issue.
Have we said all we want to say about Under the Rainbow?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's circle back. Let's circle back.
Oh God! Not Jen Psaki, please.
What I had mentioned prior to that was the movie Johnny Be Good. And I'm bringing this movie up for one reason and one reason only. Okay, you remember who all's in this, right? It's Anthony Michael Hall. He plays a high school football player who's being courted by different schools to come play college ball there. He's the quarterback. Robert Downey Jr. is in it. He plays his best friend.
Wow.
He's dating Uma Thurman, who is the sheriff's daughter or whatever type thing. But here's the thing:
Middle America, cornbread,
right? And they're literally like taking him out to like strip clubs and different stuff. Trying to like court him into that. But here's the one that I go to though. The opening scene, they're in the locker room before the game.
Oh, refresh my memory.
And the coach is giving the speech, like the
pep talk.
The pep talk, blah, blah, blah. And I haven't watched this movie in a long time, but I remember it at the time, seeing it, and then like later on thinking about it, like years later, and being like, oh, they would never be able to make this movie now because he uses the other F word multiple times in this. And it's like, we're going to go out there and prove that we're not a bunch of,
I got you.
And it's like this extended talk, quote unquote pep talk of him just like basically saying, you're not going to go out there and act like a bunch of F words and this and that and blah,
reference
blah, blah,
to
homosexuals, and all, and it's just like times have changed. It's like, oh geez, and that was one of the. We were talking about the new Bill and Ted movie, and I remember like when people were talking about some people that are a lot more liberal than us that talking about this new Bill and Ted, like those first two Bill and Ted movies are so great, except they use that other F word in each one of them. And it's like, it was a different time, okay?
Yeah,
I get it, okay?
It was a different time.
And it's also,
it was
it's also the fact of, like, if I call you that, it's not me questioning your masculinity or whether or not you're
assigning you're not assigning
It's-
a gender specific sexual preference to me in any way, shape, form, or
It's the
fashion.
same thing if I call you one of my fuckers. Okay, it's in a lot of ways
or
because
like
it's like
earlier when you said I'll always be your bitch.
exactly. It's one of those things where it's like,
which I won't be.
and I know that is I get it. Okay, because again,
just remember for future reference, I
Yeah.
may have potential dates.
well,
listening to.
yeah. Oh, I can end that very quickly.
I think you might have done that already. Actually,
I can ruin you ever getting a date again.
well, I mean, you've done it before.
Well, yeah, exactly.
No, I think the reference to that word, the definition of that word or the intent
Right.
behind the definition of that word has changed so much
Right.
in the last 20 or 30 years.
We all know that it's a bundle of sticks, or if you're English, it's a cigarette.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's one of those things that it got used as a slur towards homosexuals.
Yep.
And it stayed in a long time, and it's
and
kind
it
of
stuck.
It's
It
kind of
really-
been, and it's also kind of become like the N word, where they use it for each other,
Yeah,
and that
yeah.
type of stuff with them and taking it back. Fine. You know what? I don't say it
but
anymore.
when-
Now, granted, when I was a kid, we didn't think much of it.
Well, yeah, when we were
And-
kids, we were just kind of copying what Bill and Ted were doing,
or
It's-
whoever. I mean, even before that,
Yeah, or
it's
before
whatever our older friends or brothers or cousins or
Yeah.
or whatever, and
And
it's,
when you were saying when we call each other that,
Right.
which I mean, God,
we
I'm
don't.
sure we did at some point,
right?
but it's been a
and
couple
I'm
of decades.
sure we did it in the Bill and Ted, like
in the
that whole
Bill
like,
and Ted reference,
or just like I love you, man, I love you too, and then
Yeah.
and
but it's like it's an acknowledgement of an endearment. It's not an endearment,
No.
but it's an acknowledgement of an endearment, and it's sort of I said this really soft and nice and meaningful thing, and now I have to sort of reassert my masculinity.
Right.
It's like, man,
Or even
I
that,
really
it's-
appreciate you being there for me, and then I sock you in the arm.
Right.
It's the same thing.
I don't even know that it's reasserting your masculinity by saying. I think it's more of I just said something nice. Now I have to say something. Now I have to counteract that with something that's not so nice. In
Hey,
order to,
Alan, you've been a really good friend to me
Yeah.
over the years, Dick.
Yeah, exactly.
it's-
Exactly.
It's just
I've been a really good dick to you over the years. Too, so it's,
and there goes the dating opportunity right there.
but
She's
yeah,
like, I don't know. He's okay, but I'm not sure I want to meet his friend.
Yeah, well, no, Corey doesn't want you to meet his friend.
For so many reasons. If you never hear Alan have another podcast again, there's a reason for that.
Anyway, but yeah, that's another. I mean, as well as all the other stuff, like I said, with them taking. Of course, we did see a little bit of that with like Varsity Blues. They wound up at the strip club.
God, yeah.
and it's.
Which it was a horrible movie, but I think it was a great movie.
It's a terrible. It's a good bad movie. Is what it is.
Yeah,
It's
but it's one that I will. I hate football.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, that makes me a little un-American. I don't like pro ball. I don't like college ball. I hated football when I was in high school. I was in the band. I had to watch every football game, and I'm just sitting there going, "Oh God, when's halftime coming?
Yeah,
I want
so I
to
can
do the
play.
show
Yeah, no, it's
because I'm a nerd." And but as much as I just don't care for football and there's no politics, I didn't like football before anybody was taking a knee.
Right.
I don't.
And see, I'm just the opposite. I love football.
can't-
I love football. So
Part of me, and maybe it's my mental issues. I can't sit still that long to watch that. I'm either participating or I'm off participating in something else. But even as much as I dislike football, I love that movie. Because, of course, I get sucked into the relationships and the dynamics. Billy Bob, the actor that played him, God rest his soul.
Yeah,
he's a great guy.
Tweeter and
Tweeter and of course, I'm a guy. The whipped cream bikini was pretty nice. The accent was horrible,
Oh, God, it was
but the
terrible.
cherries on top. I'll take it.
Allie Larder and what's her name? Amy Smart.
Yeah.
Neither one of them had a good. And let's be honest, Vanderbeek's accent was terrible too. I mean, it was all three of them were just like, oh,
I think
cringy.
Vanderbeek's like natural speaking accent is terrible.
Yeah, but you know what? I know you love that. What was that car commercial that he did a few years back,
God,
where they were like, okay, and that's just sign here. Like, really, there's no drama. Oh, you want drama? Okay, and they called James Vanderbeek in, and he's like, playing for West Canyon Highway, the best days of your life, but I don't want your life.
I don't want.
Was
your
that
life.
good? Yeah, okay, we'll see you next time. All right, thanks, guys. He just like walks.
It just walks off. Again, it was a horrible movie, but it was a great movie because there were some really real moments in it, and
there were some just laugh out loud moments.
And
again, there's
you know
stuff in
what?
there that couldn't get
that
made
probably
today,
would.
you know?
God, if you found out your teacher was a stripper and
I
you went
know.
to a strip show,
Right.
I mean, she'd make the evening news.
Yeah,
I'd give you that.
Well, yeah, that would have gotten out, especially in that town. For
God,
one thing,
yeah.
There's also the whole, the tweeter, the whole
The drugs
basically drugging women to have sex with them.
A couple of beers, couple of Percocets, and the
their
panties will drop.
He looks like
Yeah.
that. Tweeter, I wonder if you're going to like it in prison.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like acknowledging that you shouldn't be doing this,
stripping down and stealing the cop car.
Yeah, exactly. There's plenty of
there's
stuff in that
plenty
movie
of
that
raucous
just,
stuff that would just not stand the test of time
I
anymore.
think the big
Although
one.
I think stealing a police car would probably still go.
I tried to one time, but
I took a light once.
Yeah.
I was 14.
I tried to one time, and that's when I found out that when they're not in the cars and the car's on, the doors are actually locked. Oh well.
Yeah. They come with that option.
Yeah, damn it. Of course, I'm sure that if the police officer had walked out of the establishment and seen me like trying to open the door, I'd have probably gone straight to jail for even attempting.
That's when you that's when you go to Tales from the Crypt Demon Night.
Yeah.
I was just testing the lock.
Yeah. So make sure nobody else is going to take it.
Yeah.
I was
making sure you guys were doing what you were
Yeah,
supposed
exactly.
to.
So-
You're doing an excellent job. Appreciate your service.
The big one that would never get made.
Uh-oh.
Oh, we all know what it is. It's Blazing Saddles.
Oh, hang on. It's just going to be a pause for laughing at every damn scene in that movie. Mel Brooks is a genius among genius.
But that movie
and what
would
makes his genius is the
never-
fact that he picked some of the most amazing comedic actors for that movie. Gene Wilder, of course.
Harvey Keitel. Harvey Korman.
Harvey Korman. God
sorry.
rest both of their souls.
Yeah.
We will never know their like again.
No.
Who played the Black Sheriff? As Dave would call it, let's pull up the magic witch box here. And
I thought I was going to get away with not having to hear that tonight.
yeah,
So,
well, I'm sitting in his chair, so I gotta pay some homage.
Cleavon Little. I knew that song.
Yeah.
Of course, Slim Pickens, Madeleine Kahn.
Oh God,
I love Madeleine.
I had
always
a massive
crush
on Madeleine Kahn.
Madeleine Kahn was beautiful.
She was absolutely
and she was a
stunningly
comic
gorgeous
genius
and
on
a
top
comic
of it
genius. What was it? Well, I mean, everything she was in. You
No,
go
my
back
favorite-
to Young Frankenstein.
My favorite
you know.
Madeleine Kahn role was Mrs. Peacock in, or not Mrs. Was it Miss Peacock?
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
She was
No, because that was what's her name? Eileen. What was her name? It wasn't. What was her name?
Yeah, I'll tell you.
I can't remember all I can't remember all my Clue references, but she was amazing in that role. I'm trying to go with Mrs. Peacock. It was Miss. It wasn't Miss Scarlet. It was.
Oh, well, come on. We're getting there. We're getting there.
Are we?
Yeah, she's absolutely an amazingly talented.
Hold on, I got it right here.
Talented actress.
She was Mrs. White.
Yeah, Mrs.
White. That's
how
what
appropriate.
It was. Yeah. But yeah, our Young Frankenstein.
Yeah. Oh my God! Again, comic genius in Young Frankenstein. Again, another Gene Wilder role, and was it Ed Asner?
No,
not Ed Asner. I was.
Are you talking about the Frankenstein
the monster?
It was what is his name? God, I can't believe we can't pull all these names. Used to, I could pull every one of these names off the top of my head.
If the microphones were not on, we would have these in a heartbeat.
It's because Peter Boyle.
Peter Boyle.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you got Peter Lorre in there too. The Hunchback.
No, that was Marty Feldman.
Marty Feldman, that's right. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about like the actual Hunchback movies. Peter Lorre.
Yeah, no, it was Marty Feldman.
Yeah, Marty Feldman. Again, and that's what makes to me any of those movies, any Mel Brooks movie, or Gene Wilder. When you put the right people together, there's a natural sort of gestalt. The sum of the parts are equal to or greater than the whole, and when you put those people together, they become greater than who any of them are collectively, and that's what made, I think, such a great atmosphere to do those movies. They wouldn't stand. Probably 90% of Mel Brooks movies wouldn't stand the test of time. I mean, I bet somebody could find something wrong with Spaceballs.
Yeah. But you have the other one that comes to mind is History of the World Part 1.
Oh, God.
Because there's some funny stuff in there, and then there's some stuff that's like, oh wow, you could tell this definitely came out at a different time. So.
Yeah, and here's a great example, and we actually have a proof metric for it. This is a movie that absolutely did not stand the test of time, and we know that. The movie The Producers, the first one, the original, was comic gold. It was genius. There were some, it's springtime in Hitler in Germany,
and they remade it, and they really played down a lot.
And they played down a lot of
stuff,
stuff, and the movie bombed.
Yeah,
it was a horrible movie. I still have that movie, the remake, on DVD. And it's still in the plastic.
That's one of those.
I never unwrapped it because I had heard so many bad things about it that I'm just like, I'm just not going to waste 2 hours of my life.
That's one of those movies that no one was asking to be remade.
Yeah.
That was, and it's not even for the
it's
springtime for Hitler or whatever, but it was like nobody wants to see this movie remade.
It was a little too innocuous.
Yeah, it's like because I know that it had just had a revival on Broadway.
Yeah.
Having a successful revival on Broadway
does not translate to the silver screen.
Exactly, and
not
that
always.
Was every once in a while, but it's still one of those things where it was like that one. Nobody was asking for that.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way.
The original, great, wonderful.
Yeah.
I could watch it now and be in stitches. I'd roll out of my chair and laugh and giggle and cough, because I ran out of oxygen or whatever. But yeah, the remake was completely and utterly unnecessary. It sounds to me almost like, hey, look, I have this contractual obligation. Let's just do this.
I know that Matthew Broderick and Nathan Lane were in the revival on Broadway.
Yeah, and both of them in their own right, they're great.
They're good.
I love Nathan Lane.
Right. Again, I did not see the Broadway revival. I know they won Tonys, and different stuff, and I was like, and I've heard that the two of them were really good. From what I have not seen the entire movie, I've seen a good chunk of it, but for some reason it just did not translate that there was anything with them there wasn't
a lot of chemistry there.
And it's like, man, like I said, they just had a successful run on Broadway with this.
Yeah,
but it feels like they're in two completely different movies here. And I think Nathan Lane's hilarious. Okay.
Oh yeah, I do too.
And you never watched Modern Family, did you?
No, but
dude, he had a reoccurring character.
I knew everything I needed to know about Nathan Lane's talent from the movie The Birdcage.
Yes. Oh, he's amazing in that movie. He's amazing.
Anybody that can stand out while standing next to Robin Williams has got talent, and
Gene Hackman
and Gene Hackman too.
I mean I know it's
Gene Hackman is one of my favorites from way back, just simply because he goes into a genre of film a lot,
right?
That I appreciate. I'm a big fan of westerns. I don't necessarily like the Hollywood aspect of it, but I like some of the character acting in it, and of course Gene Hackman plays an amazingly good bad guy, and by good bad guy I mean he's the bad guy that thinks he's doing the right thing. thing.
Right. His character in
Unforgiven. Yeah.
He thinks
Little
he's the
Bill
good guy.
Daggett. Yeah, he thinks he's the good guy.
I know.
And he's not.
No.
He's a sadist.
Of course, the whole thing is that there are no good guys in that movie.
Well,
that's the whole thing.
Yeah, and that's one thing that you could actually kind of consider to be historically accurate, because there really were no good guys in the West.
Right.
It was kill or be killed. It was, and I mean, every day wasn't a gun battle at high noon. In fact, there weren't gun battles at high noon.
No.
Most
complete Hollywood fabrication.
Yeah, most people that got killed in the West were shot in the back. Because you know why? Because that's a good tactic.
Yeah, it works.
I can shoot
when you
him.
don't have someone pointing a gun at you while you're shooting. It's a lot easier to kill them than it is the other way.
When they're facing away from you, you greatly reduce the risks of getting shot.
That's how Jesse James was killed.
Yeah,
he was shot in the Bell Star the same way.
Yeah,
I mean it's a. So yeah, there's
a lot of Hollywood there, and that may be another episode someday, maybe. But just for Nathan Lane to be able to stand out in the face of so many accomplished and talented actors, I was sad the day that Gene Hackman decided that I'm just going to retire.
I know.
And
he did it so quietly.
He just stopped taking roles. He didn't make an announcement. Nope. It's not there's nobody needs to do a parade or do an article. It was just like. It's almost Forrest Gump like. He was like, I think I'll go home now. And that's what he did. He just stopped showing up in movies. He stopped taking scripts.
Forrest Gump is another one that probably couldn't get made right now because you're dealing with someone who is...
I was really shocked at some of the cries against that movie. They're talking
as time has gone on, people have looked at that and been like...
Well, he's making fun of Vietnam vets. And
just him of being... his mental challenge, of
making sort of comic moments
it's not even
at
that
the expense of someone that's challenged.
It's the fact that these days that there would be an outcry. Well, why don't you get someone who does have that challenge in order to play this role?
Because they maybe can't memorize the
lines.
There
and let's be honest, none of them is as good an actor as Tom Hanks. On top of it all, I mean that's and it's one of those things that again, like with watching that movie now, especially having a son who's on the spectrum, I recognize, he's autistic.
That's, And
that was the whole thing. That like at the time, it was like
question for me,
right?
But I'd had some experience with dealing with autism, and not dealing with it in the sense of I gotta carry this burden.
Right.
But I had enough exposure to that even then when I saw Forrest Gump, I was like, oh yeah, he's autistic.
Yeah,
he's not stupid.
No.
He's not retarded.
He just looks at things differently.
I'm sorry, that's not the favorite word these days.
Yeah,
but I don't care.
Right.
I could go back and use the F word to.
No, that's okay. Really,
to address people that have a problem with me using the R word. But maybe we can make an acronym.
I'll just have an after credits thing where you just like say all the words that we're not supposed to say. A little disclaimer.
I'll feel like
Project Gen X podcast does not endorse anything that Corey has said.
I feel like I'd be paying like a small homage to George Carlin if I did that. 7 words you can't say.
George Carlin's comedy would not fly.
Sam
Kinnison's comedy would not fly these days.
Okay, to be fair,
Richard Pryor's comedy
I'm a big fan,
would not fly
I'm a big
these days.
fan sometimes of Sam Kinison. It depends on what mood I'm in.
Yeah.
But Sam Kinnison's comedy didn't fly then.
No. Well, I mean,
he was so far.
He was so controversial.
Outside.
I know.
He was beyond controversy.
I know.
There were people that hated him.
I know.
And the fact that he used to be a Baptist minister. Mm-hmm. Before he went into comedy and started doing a lot of coke, that it was an extra slap in the face,
right.
So they hated him for all sorts of reasons, not just his topics, his material.
Genius.
He really was. I mean, talking about him, I want to try and scream like that on the mic. I won't do it, but
Kinnison,
because I'll sound like a 6-year-old schoolgirl. But
if Kinnison had lived and was still alive today, he would be the ultimate troll online. I mean, like, just the ultimate troll.
Man before his time.
Yes, and I mean, like, just all he would have to do is just roll out a couple of words and set the entire internet ablaze.
And I will tell you right now, when I heard he died, I was in one of my phases where I'm like, I don't like him.
Yeah. Well, it's such an odd story also with him.
But when he died, I saw it. I saw it on the news or whatever outlet that came out on.
Right. I think I actually saw it on MTV.
And I remember
it was in 93 when it happened.
I remember like shrugging my shoulders and go, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
God was listening.
Well, you know, and that's the whole he died in a car wreck.
Yeah.
And it was
he was like rolled over like a big truck like.
Yeah, but it was one of those things.
He was in a Geo Metro and he got hit by a dump truck.
He was on the side of the road, and it was one of those things that they said his last words. It was like he was talking to God. He was like, "No, I'm not ready to go yet."
Yeah.
All right, fine. And that was it.
Yeah.
And it was just like
surreal.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
it was a very surreal thing.
And but it was just and that was another thing. He used to go on Howard Stern's show. And in the mornings, and it was one of those things that like you would hear him on there. He's like, "Oh, he's been up all night doing coke."
Yeah. In fact, this might be night number 3.
Yeah, I know, and it just like, but Eddie Murphy. You go back to Raw.
Oh,
a lot of the jokes that he made in there, especially about homosexuals and stuff.
Yeah,
it's just like
that stuff would
dude,
not.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that some of these guys haven't had to like make some sort of public formal apology today over that.
And it's
because that's the standard.
Ours,
if I did something in 1953, I'd have to apologize.
Like I said, Richard Pryor, man. Yeah. Some of the stuff. And you know what's funny about Richard Pryor is that he was another guy that was ahead of his time.
Way ahead.
A lot, and I'm not even talking about like his comedy style. I'm just talking about some of the stuff that he talked about, because I have, especially in recent years with some of the stuff that's happened, one of his shows from like the late 70s where he was in LA and he was talking about the cops, about the chokehold and stuff, about like, this is the reason why I don't live out here, and of course, and everybody's like, of course he's making jokes about it and everything, but that became a real thing under what's his name? Who was the police commissioner out there during the LA riots and everything? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
He was a commissioner for like a couple of decades, and everybody hated him. It was like the cops hated him, the citizens hated him. I mean,
then the riots
they finally got rid of him.
That gave them the juice they needed to get rid of him.
Daryl Gates, that's his name. But I mean, but it's one of those things that again, he was calling out Daryl Gates a good 15 years before
earlier,
anybody else was, and it just
so the thing about comedy for me, stand-up comedy in particular. I mean, you get it a little bit in the movies from these stand-up comedians that have wound up in movies,
right?
Because they just kind of carry their shtick over into the role is sort of created with them in mind. But the thing that I've always appreciated and respected about stand-up comedians like Pryor, like George Carlin, some of the ones that got into some of the more controversial topics, they were able to make us laugh about something that was serious, but in such a way that it was thought-provoking.
Right.
I go back and listen to stuff that George Carlin was putting out in like the late 80s, early 90s, and I said this earlier today. The things that he was joking about then are happening now.
Right.
And the irony is the culture that's been created that is taking the comedy out of comedy is they're shooting themselves in the foot because the comedians in some way, I don't know if it's a small way or a big way, but it's a way that resonates with a lot of people that see their shows or listen to their shows or YouTube their shows or whatever. They go back and listen to these things, and they've taken that stuff away when that was the stuff that got them here in the first place to be able to do this and ultimately make this bad decision.
Well, the funny thing about it, though, is that, like, you go back to, like, Lenny Bruce. Okay, or George Carlin. Either one of those guys.
Well, and Lenny Bruce was like George Carlin's inspiration.
Right,
That's why he changed his comedic style.
But it's one of those things when you look at guys like
Carlin
that.
was the second person to get arrested
for and it's one of
those
those things where for obscenity charges. Yeah. So it's one of those things you look at, like that through line of those guys to Richard Pryor, who comes into that, and then you go into a few others and that kind of stuff, to where they were not just edgy, but they were groundbreaking, and they were pushing those limits of like whenever you have obscenity laws on the books and they're breaking them purposefully, of No, that's
To
the whole
make the
thing.
point.
We have the freedom of speech in this country to say, you don't have to like what I'm saying,
Exactly.
but I have the right to say it.
And so
you know?
I saw something that's just ironic that we
Well, hold on. Before we
got
get to
this
that,
point.
what I was going to say though is that the thing is that when you had the big stand-up boom in the '80s
yeah.
and all through the '90s, comedy got really complacent. Like there were some still like I love Dennis Leary. There's a bunch of guys that came through all that they were good, but they were starting to play safe.
Yeah, but
and all that
somehow
kind of stuff.
But somehow we still got Sinbad.
Well, they were playing
beat
safe.
Dennis Miller out,
but they
you
were
know?
playing. But they were playing safe. It was like a lot of that kind of stuff. And it's kind of one of those things now with cancel culture and all that kind of stuff, where comedy has become edgy again. Where it's like comedy, stand-up comedy especially. It's like rock and roll. It's better whenever it's fighting against something.
Yeah, comedy. But the problem is
and that's one
mind,
of my opinions.
Yeah.
The reason why rock music sucks so much is they're not fighting against anything.
Yeah, nobody's mad at anything.
No,
anymore.
nobody. Everybody's like, oh no, we got to all get along. We got to fuck, you're getting along. Okay?
Yeah.
Rock and roll's never been about getting along. Okay,
Yeah,
it's
but the problem on the comedy side of it is you're allowed to be edgy as long as you tweet
Playing
out
inside,
certain things, and you're only focusing on a certain group that is allegedly to blame for focusing on all other groups later.
Then you have a Joe Rogan or a Bill Burr. God.
Bill Burr, yeah.
God, I
man.
wish Patrice O'Neill were still alive right now, because that dude would be having a field day with all of this stuff.
I would love to see. I would love to see Bill Burr now having coffee and a cigar with Dennis Leary 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Because
Leary went Hollywood. I mean,
that would be a conversation worth listening to.
Right.
Because you would come away with like a touch of everything that you needed. You would come away with a touch of raucous philosophy. You would come away with the appropriate amount of sacrilegious religion.
That's a good way of putting it.
It's faith based and it's meaningful, but there's this little piss off right next to it.
Exactly.
It's Jesus kicking over tables and cracking a bullwhip. That's it's not, sorry, it's not just all peace and love.
I know, and
but I miss that because you talking about Lenny Bruce. Lenny Bruce went to jail multiple times over the obscenity laws. And it never really took off. The fight against that never took off with Lenny Bruce. He just kind of had to take a big old bite out of the shit sandwich, and he's like, yeah, okay, I got a record. The next person to really go to jail for violating those obscenity laws was George Carlin.
Right, the seven words you can't say on
his
radio.
Stuff went all the way to the Supreme Court,
right,
and it's still there. That's the thing. It's still there. It's never been fully resolved. It's addressed, and Carlin stepped away from that a long time ago because Carlin's perspective, and this is what I was saying, ironic, a couple of weeks ago, I fell into this on a rabbit hole day, and it's an old interview with Carlin in the late 80s, and he was like, I got what I wanted about it, because now I can do that stuff and not get arrested for it.
Right.
I really don't care that it's still in the Supreme Court. I got what I wanted out of it. That's America. I got what I wanted. Nobody's messing with me for it.
It's like Larry Flint. It's one of those things that, like,
I can't stand the man.
Yeah,
but you know what?
You know what? He did.
But I got some respect for him. I got some mad respect for him because he stood his ground. He stood
no,
for
it's
what
not
he
even
wanted.
just that. It's the fact that he took Jerry Falwell all the way to the Supreme Court and won.
Yeah,
and I have no respect for Jerry Falwell.
Well, yeah,
whatsoever.
I mean,
I'm sorry.
Falwell.
Don't even get me started on Falwell.
Yeah, you can't claim to be the moral, religious right,
yeah,
and then turn around and get nailed for some of the things. Oh, pardon the expression, but get nailed for some of the things that you got nailed for.
Well, we're not going to get into.
Yeah,
Falwell.
we're not.
That's
a
whole other thing. But now the irony of that is the fact that after all that happened, Falwell and Flint became friends.
Yeah.
And we're all the way up until Flint died, or actually until Falwell died. You know,
I always kind of look at that relationship as, you got this old World War II vet. He was, with the 101st Airborne. He parachuted at Normandy Beach. And there's some other German soldier that was in a pillbox that, he was captured or whatever. And, they were on the same battlefield shooting the same bullets at each other. And both of them just happened to live. And 10 years later, they meet on accident in a coffee shop in Paris. And they were on opposing sides. And they were taught and trained to hate each other so that it made it easier for them to kill each other. And once it was all over, they were able to set aside those things, and they became friends.
Well, they realized, especially in that analogy, you realize it was governments fighting. These weren't people fighting each other.
And it was much the same, I feel like, between Falwell and Flint.
Right.
And
it was philosophies that were fighting each other. It wasn't Falwell and Flint fighting each other.
Exactly. And I think, I kind of sit in between them a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of Flint.
No, I'm not a huge fan of either one of them.
Yeah, but I'm not a huge fan of Falwell. But I think there's an example in that that the generations that we hate. The ones that are younger than us.
Yeah. And the ones that are older than well, at least one that's older than us.
At least one that's older.
Our grandparents were cool, but it's like
but God, I'm about to make myself feel really old when I say this, but
the kids these
today,
days. I remember the first time I said that. I was about 25.
Yeah,
I was like, did I really just say that?
Oh, God, just kill me now. But kids these days have become so black and white that it's either love or hate. There's no like anymore. And they need to see those relationships. They need to see those people that on the field they were bitter enemies.
Right.
But they could still sit down and get along and be friends and agree to disagree.
Right.
Was there some like personal agenda or life agenda motives behind that conversation? I guarantee you the cynical side of me looks at that and says, you know what? Falwell wants to convert Flint. He wants to bring Larry Flint to Jesus.
Right.
Okay, that's fine. That's what he's supposed to do. That's his whole life right there.
Right.
Flint wants to get him to watch a porno, or three, with his wife and a girlfriend, and so they both want to quote unquote corrupt each other.
Right. Well, it also going back, especially with the political discourse we're in right now. It goes back to, and there's a great documentary called Best of Enemies. I just looked it up because it was like, it's Buckley versus Vidal.
Okay.
William F. Buckley and Gore Vidal.
Yeah.
Okay. William F. Buckley, staunch conservative.
Oh, yes.
Gore Vidal, really hardcore liberal.
Raging liberal. Even by today's standards.
Yeah, and they they did all kinds, they would be on the same shows and stuff and just debate and like go at each other. They're best of friends. Off the camera.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just, and it was one of those things where it was like, okay, that's sure.
And that's a wrap.
Yeah.
You want to go get some coffee? Yeah,
It's that.
Let's go to the coffee shop we went to last time. The one we went to before.
That old and that old Looney Tunes with the Wile E. Coyote and the sheepdog.
And the sheepdog, Sam.
Hey, Sam is. Hey, Sam. Hey,
morning, Sam.
Morning, Sam.
Morning, morning, Dave.
It was whatever it was.
He called him Dave, I think.
Yeah, I think it was. And they would go in, and they literally would like clock in. And the entire time, the coyote was trying to steal the sheep, and the dog was
killing it.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then the whistle would sound at 5 o'clock.
Well, the whistle would sound for lunch, and they'd go sit down and have a lunch,
and there'd be about right back to it again.
It'd be like a 5-10 second scene of kids watching these
sitting
two
watching
mortal enemies share a sandwich and pour each other coffee.
Right.
They'd clock back in and go back to work after lunch, and it was the same old. They're trying to kill each other.
And at 5 o'clock, the whistle blow, they'd clock out, and they'd be like, see
you tomorrow, Sam.
I see you.
See you tomorrow, Dave.
Yeah. And that
same thing?
Yep. Exactly. And it's just like...
One of my favorite cartoons.
I know. I love that. I've often said that that's kind of the way I see God and Satan.
Sometimes, yeah. I think so.
Especially when you go and you look at like the Book of Job, of like...
Yeah, there's some challenges.
Yeah, type stuff, and it's like, okay, I can kind of see that. And hey, morning Lucifer, morning God or Yahweh, whatever they're calling him.
Yeah.
It's like morning. Yeah, same thing in a day. Yep. You're just.
What are we gonna do today, Pinky?
Yeah.
Same thing we do every night. Try to take over the world.
One's a genius and one's insane. Let's talk about that.
Okay. Yeah.
Who's the genius and who's insane?
I think they're both a little bit of both.
Pinky's the genius.
Pinky is the genius.
And the brain is the one's insane because what do we know about insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again.
Expecting a different
exactly.
result. But the cynic in me always has always preferred the brain, just simply because he had the great one-liners. Pinky, do me a favor. Try not to breathe. And you can hear just that slight agitation in his voice. Or Yakko, Wacko, and Dot. He said, my bottom hurts.
Mm-hmm. Did you try to watch the new ones?
I did, and I made it through about maybe 8 minutes.
I
made it
the
through
entire
one.
first.
I made it through one commercial break and into the
I
next
watched
segment.
the entire first episode
and
of
I
it,
couldn't do
and I
it.
was like, nope, this is ridiculous.
They have dumbed this down and milk toasted this to death.
It's unwatchable.
It has.
It
had the taste of air.
Yeah, there was not.
It wasn't even sour and bitter. I might have been able to accept that, but it was just sour.
Animaniacs in a lot of ways was a very subversive show.
Oh, it was.
Because I would watch that show.
It was the perfect show designed for children and adults.
And that and Tiny Toons both. I remember watching them and being like,
I couldn't really get into the Tiny Toons.
I did. I
needed something a little bit more dark.
I was fresh out of. we were fresh out of high school somewhere around when they came on the air. And I remember like watching in the afternoon and being like, man, this is really good. Kids aren't going to get a lot of these jokes,
Nope.
And especially when you got to Animaniacs.
Especially when you got to Dot.
Oh my god. Yeah.
And I'm just going to put it out here the way it should have been put out here when Animaniacs came out. Dot was a slut. She was a dirty slut, and
she liked the men,
and I loved her for it. God bless her.
But there was a lot of of course the Wacko was always the Yakko and Wacko is the hello nurse. It's like that's a little above kids' heads there.
Yeah,
that's all of us adults, and of course they had one of the dirtiest jokes ever put on a kids show.
Well, which one? I've seen every episode, but
they're being detectives, okay?
Uh-huh.
And Yakko is like, Wacko, go do this, blah blah blah, and
Dot.
He goes, go look for prints or whatever, like talking about like fingerprints, and so Dot runs off and she comes back with
prints. Yeah.
And he said, no, I meant fingerprints, and she looked at him and they looked at each other. She goes, well, I don't think so.
Yeah, okay.
And it was
I do remember that.
Wow.
It's like,
that is.
Think so. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Out of Context Theater. Tonight we'll be showing.
Well, that's the whole thing. It's like the whole thing is it wasn't out of context. It was like square in the middle of context.
And that's when Yakko says, good night, folks.
Yeah, exactly. It was, but it was just kind of one of those like, wow, they really?
Yeah. Wacko said, I'm hungry.
Yeah. But yeah, that show was so good.
I have to party.
Of course, it spun off Pinky and the Brain. You had Good Feathers, which again, kids aren't going to get
kids
that.
Thought that stuff was hilarious.
But they're not going to get the Goodfellas reference.
I know. Look, it's talking birds.
Yeah.
It's talking pigeons.
Or the Katie Kaboom, and just all the different, what was it, Mindy and Buttons and
silly Buttons.
Yeah. Buttons was always like getting in trouble for stuff that she did.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It just like it just. There was a lot of stuff that it was a very subversive show.
Yeah, and
very much.
And that stuff would,
again, obviously they can't play it today because they went completely PC whenever they did this one, and it was just like, no, this is not good.
Yeah,
it's not good.
PC
comedy is not
the fun
funny
killer.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, she's a raging liberal, and that's okay. You be what you want, live your life.
Yeah.
I don't have to agree with it. You don't have to agree with me, but Nikki Glaser.
Yeah.
She's
Nikki Glazer's funny.
She is hilarious.
She is hilarious.
But you know why she's hilarious? Because she gets to say the stuff that nobody else is allowed to say. And so she gets to hoard the comedy. But, I mean, listening to her in a roast, on a comedy roast, and for those of you who have never really experienced those things, it's going to hurt your feelings, and it should, and you should embrace it because it's so good funny
for
you.
Because
listen to her during any of the comedy roasts that she does. I mean, it's. She was. Who is it? It's a conservative talk show lady. Ann
Coulter.
Coulter. Ann Coulter kind of sits on the dais every now and then at these comedy roasts, and I mean, it's such a fluid and almost blatantly subtle joke, but the format for a comedy roast, you have the roastie, the guest of honor, and then but they go up and each comedian they kind of go after everybody, and then the finale for their portion is to go after the person of honor, and so Nikki Glazer's up there and she looks at everybody in the audience and says, Ann Coulter's here, ladies and gentlemen. Ann Coulter's written 12 books, 13 if you count Mein Kampf, and it's a nice shot. It's it's well delivered. It's well written. It's well performed, and And then she follows it up with, "It's okay, I can make that joke because I'm not Jewish." And if anybody else said that, they would just cease to exist. I mean, they would erase everything that person had ever thought, much less done or said.
The whole thing with the comedy roasts that are on Comedy Central, they're funny.
Oh, they're hilarious, and they're horribly wrong, but that's why they're funny.
But they do not hold a candle to the old Friars roast that they're based on.
Yeah.
Now, talk about stuff that could never happen
ever.
today.
And that's where I was.
Yeah.
That's how I was going.
The Friars roast
were like Dean Martin,
they would,
and
nothing
Sammy
was
Davis
off the table.
Jr.
Nothing was off the table whatsoever. It didn't
Don
matter.
Rickles.
Oh God, Don Rickles. I mean, it was
Don
literally...
Rickles. The genius of Don Rickles, though, was he would say all of these things without quite saying them.
Right.
And he let your mind do the work. So by today's standards, the question is was Don Rickles the bigot, or are you
the bigot? Right, exactly, exactly.
And I think that was in that time that was the way to be edgy, to challenge the thought process, because Don Rickles in his real life, that was his gimmick, that was his shtick. That's not who he was.
Right.
Don Rickles, and a lot of people don't realize this because, Don Rickles just looks like every other white guy that existed in 1962.
Right.
But Don Rickles was Jewish.
Right.
Not many people realize that. He was, and he was an amazing comedian, and anything he did today, if he did it today, they'd take him out back and shoot him.
Right. Well, it's funny talking about like people who kind of leaned into a character for their comedy. You know who Fred Willard was.
Yes.
You know exactly. I mean, he was in all of like he was in Best in Show. He was in he was in all of those mockumentaries. He was in Waiting for Guffman and The Mighty Wind. He always plays that real square kind of dad, whatever. What's funny, most people don't know, and I didn't know this until several years back, and I went back and looked it up. When he got his start in the early 60s, he was this really edgy comedian.
Yeah.
Like stand-up guy. I mean, just like, and then one day he just like leaned into this square character and never came out of it.
But it worked for him.
Exactly. And he made a career out of it.
He found his niche and
right.
It's
like Bobcat Goldthwait, okay, who is somebody who is hilarious.
Bobcat
Goldthwait is hilarious, okay, but the whole thing is people think A lot of people think of him as from that 80s where he's doing that.
Yeah, the Police Academy
he's
stuff.
He's so not that person.
Well, he's not that
all,
person,
you know?
but his stand-up routine was all that too.
It was then, but then he moved away from it. Of course, he started doing he started directing movies.
Well, yeah,
and stuff.
and part of it was because everybody in the 80s was doing it at the time that had any. Yeah. So one of his little like gimmicks, and it was a sponsorship, is all it was. Is for all you young people, you've never heard of this because it doesn't exist anymore. He would go out onto the stage to do his stand-up routine with a 6-pack of Tab, which was a cola. It was a soft
diet drink,
and it was horrible, which is why it doesn't exist anymore. But I always
remember Diet Right.
I remember never drinking it, and but I was always fairly certain that Bob Goldthwait would come out with his little 6-pack of Tab. He'd crack one open and take a drink, and I'm like, "There's not Tab in that. No. That's Coke." It's like he found a way to liquefy Coke, and he's just doing doing streams of Coke.
He was so funny because like. Bobcat Goldthwait is an extremely smart person.
Oh, he's exceptionally intelligent.
I mean, like, exceptionally. If you ever, like, listen to him in interviews, it's like, no, dude, I want to sit down at dinner with this guy and just talk about life.
Yeah. Because I think he's made enough mistakes that he's actually figured it out.
Yeah, but it's still one of those things where it's like, the guy is this smart. I mean, it's just like, whoa. It's like Gilbert Gottfried.
Oh God, yeah.
If you ever go back and watch like the one season that he was on Saturday Night Live, is before he started doing that. This is Gilbert Gottfried.
Yeah.
When he was just talking his normal voice, and it sounds so strange.
Oh, it does. It's for him to speak in a normal voice.
I know. It's just like, whoa.
I didn't catch him on that one season of SNL.
That was terrible.
I'd already given up on SNL at that point.
Well, that season. No one survived that season because it was like him and Anthony Michael Hall and Robert Downey Jr. and Julie Louis-Dreyfus and it's like all these people who went on to like be something
big huge careers
did nothing that season. Randy Quaid was on that season. I mean, what's her name? Cusack, Joan Cusack was on there. None of them survived that season.
And Joan is another. She's a genius.
Cusack,
I love her too. But the first time I ever heard Gilbert Gottfried with his normal speaking voice was in an episode of CSI, the original CSI series, because a comedian in a stand-up comedian
dies, right? And they're trying
they're trying to figure out who did it. And Bob Goldthwait was in that episode, and Gilbert Gottfried and honestly, you'll have to go back and watch the episode because I don't remember who actually did it. But
I don't know.
But I'd heard Bob Goldthwait's normal voice before.
Right.
But listening to him in that episode, I'm still sort of shocked because the gimmick was so far away from the real voice.
Right.
And heard Gilbert Gottfried and he exaggerated it a little bit. What exaggerated his normal voice a little bit was that you heard both voices. You heard his stand-up routine where he's talking like this the whole time.
Right.
And then you hear him off stage, normal speaking voice, and you're like, whoa, that's the
it's jarring. It's really jarring.
Drastically different voice. He almost sounds melodic when he talks in his normal voice. And so it's a big culture shock to be able to see those two things come out. But Gilbert Gottfried, speaking of things that you would get shut down for, he's one of them that got shut down.
Because of the what was it that he made fun of? It was something. It was was it what was it? He made a joke about.
I almost think
because he was the Aflac duck.
Yeah, and then
he made a joke.
And he lost it.
He made a joke on Twitter about. Was it the Fukushima?
It was something like
that. And then they canceled his contract, and I mean just because he made a joke about it on one of the roasts, and he's like blah 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 blah. And can I please just have my sponsorship back?
Yes.
I forget what it was, but yeah, he made some joke about something and got into some trouble, and It was something. It was some kind of tragedy that happened. And
yeah, I remember this. This was a thing for a while. So yeah, I cheated and I looked it up. I'll try and pick highlights and read some of this a little bit. It's from a website I found on a search engine called Inside Hook, and the title is Gilbert Gottfried says he's, quote, sentimental about old-time lynch mobs, end quote. The comedian made the comment in a promo for Fox Nation's Canceled in the USA. In a time where, at this point I believe at this point we're post George Floyd. George Floyd's already been killed, and there's a lot of marches and things like that. This
might be something new, but
oh no, I'm sorry, I stand corrected. This is 10 years ago now.
Yeah, it was the tsunami. It was the Fukushima.
I forget how long he's been unemployed.
It was the Fukushima, like the tsunami.
Earthquake. Some of Godfrey's jokes about the disaster, which killed 19,747 people and injured a little over 6,000, included, quote, I just split up with my girlfriend, but like the Japanese say, there'll be another one floating by any minute now.
Oh, wow, yeah, that's a bit...
And, quote, Japan called me, they said maybe those jokes are a hit in the U.S., but over here they're all sinking. Aflac does 75% of its business in Japan.
I
stand corrected. Yeah, it was about the Fukushima
I thought it was the
issue,
that tsunami. Yeah, and he was not the only one. There's been people who've made jokes about other stuff.
Who's the comedian that did a lot of the roasts?
Which one?
His dad was a firefighter that perished in the 9/11 attacks. Unfortunately, this this particular comedian committed suicide a few years ago. Comedy roast.
Oh, what was his name?
Wow, I'm just relying on this phone thing.
I know you're as bad as Dave. So.
But actually, I'm Greg Giraldo.
Yeah.
Greg Giraldo got a little bit of a pass. He made some jokes about 9/11, but he lost his dad in 9/11, so he kind of got a pass on that. He was the one that was actually able to kind of get away with saying the joke and then looking at everybody going, "What? Too soon? I lost my dad."
Right. Right. Yeah, I know.
You feel sorry for me and laugh at the joke, but. I'm one of those people, and I have to be very careful about my humor depending on the company that I'm in. Not because I don't care, because I don't, but I don't want to create difficulties down the road for myself. Really, honestly, it's about me. I don't care about you or your feelings. If it's funny, I'm going to acknowledge it. I can listen to a horrible joke, like perhaps a racially charged joke, or a sexual orientation joke, a bigotry related type joke, and I could have complete distaste for the topic of the joke, but I can still appreciate the construction of the joke.
Well,
and I'm like, wow, that's really well put together. Horrible topic, but it it's well put together.
I was we know that I drive for a rideshare service, and the other night I was driving and somebody had said something about Michael Jackson or whatever. So I pulled some up and we were listening to it in the car. So I'll go to the next stop.
There's a lot of jokes there.
Well, I'll go to the next stop and like people get in and like they were a younger, trio. And one of them said something about, wow, you're listening to Michael Jackson, And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, so I'm like, all right, look. I mean, before they even had a chance, I was like, look, here's the thing.
He wasn't found guilty. Shut up.
No, it wasn't even that. I was just like, look, I think Michael Jackson was a horrible, disgusting human being. And I've been on that since back in the 90s when all of it first came out. I've said that since then. I was like, no, this makes perfect sense that he would do this, and especially if it keeps coming up over time, even before that documentary came out a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
He had already gone through 2 different lawsuits over
huge,
the same thing.
Lots of news coverage.
And so it was one of those things, but it was like I told them, I was like, look, here's the thing. I don't condone anything that Michael Jackson did whatsoever. I think it's disgusting.
But I like his music.
I like his music. I can
But the problem is-
I can separate the music from him, and this is what I was like as the capper. I was like, but the big thing here is the fact that if I went through my entire music collection and got rid of all of the degenerates that made music, I would have no music to listen to.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole. I mean, it's just there's something everywhere, and so you separate the music or the movie or the whatever from the person. You know, the whole Kevin Spacey thing. Okay, everybody, you know, he's been canceled for a while, and rightly so, because the guy, you know, the only person I've ever known who like got caught up in a sex scandal, you know, for sexual assault. And then his
actually paid the price for it.
But his explanation was, well, I'm gay. No, that's not an explanation. That's not an excuse for why you did that.
Congratulations.
Yeah, but that was the whole thing.
Now you're gay and an asshole.
Right, you know. And it's like, now here's the thing. I think Kevin Spacey's a piece of shit. Okay, I'm sorry.
But I think he's an amazing actor.
Amazing actor, and he's in some movies I love. And I'm not just going to I'm never going to watch Seven again because Kevin Spacey's in this.
Yeah,
well,
or I'm never going to watch The Usual Suspects again.
Same thing with Jeffrey Jones.
Yeah.
Okay, disgusting human being found with child pornography. And that's not alleged. He went to jail for it.
Yeah.
But Ferris Bueller's Day Off, he's great in that. He's great in Beetlejuice. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm not going to not watch those movies because Jeffrey Jones is in that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not happening.
Well, so to me, there's an assigned punishment. You know, I don't know if you can apply any religious philosophies to this, you know, whether biblical or otherwise. I don't know if you can apply that, but I would like to think that wherever Michael Jackson is now, if there's some place for Michael Jackson to be, heaven, hell, chilling
Jehovah's
with
Witness, so he didn't
Buddha,
believe in either of those, you know. So
the Heaven's Gate spaceship that didn't pick up anybody that ate the applesauce. I don't know. You know, but here's the thing: if there is some kind of conscious awareness that Michael Jackson has, that means every time I'm listening to the radio and actually listening to a radio station, and it's maybe a mixed, 80s, 90s pop station or whatever, and a Michael Jackson song comes on, he's probably going to be a little happy that I'm listening to it, but he's also going to feel the pain of knowing that I'm also thinking, man, I like this music. I really wish he wasn't a pedophile.
Right. That was...
And I hope that he feels that,
right?
Because that should be sort of his eternal sentence. Because doing that to a child is a horrible thing, and then trying to buy your way out of it exacerbates that.
I know.
It makes it even more horrible,
right?
And the fact that the parents accepted it or knew because a case had happened before them or two cases had happened before them and said, "Yeah, sure, Billy, go ahead, go over to Uncle Michael's house."
I know.
He's got some really neat toys.
That is
all of those people. There's a special place in hell for them.
When that documentary came out, and we're sitting there, and I'm like, I don't care what year it is. Who thinks it's okay for your 8-year-old child to go stay at Michael Jackson's house, a grown man, and sleep in the same bed with him?
If you're in your underwear, but you're just cuddling and talking. Look, hey, when I was trying to get a date. And I successfully managed to get it the date, which was a rare occasion, but I still got it. Yeah, eventually it's like, why don't we just cuddle? We
don't need to know what your technique is here,
or hey, you want a back rub?
Right. I know, but it is. It's one of those things. It's like again, you go back to the parents and you go, what parent thinks this is okay?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
I've never understood that.
No parent thinks it's okay, but somebody did a risk analysis, a flawed one, and said, my kid's going to be traumatized, but we'll be able to afford the therapy by the time this is all over with.
I know, and that's yes, I do blame the parents in this situation.
I do absolutely. I don't blame the first set of parents
because they didn't know. But even still,
there wasn't.
But even still, no, I'm talking about
a little strange.
Even before all that stuff came out, even before there were even hints of it.
Yeah.
Who lets their grade school kid
go spend the night with
Michael Jackson
and sleep in the same bed?
I know.
In their underwear.
That is just
it's. I mean,
that
here's who
red
does
flags
that.
going off everywhere.
Here's someone who does that. Someone who doesn't care about their kids but they do care a lot about money.
Yeah,
and or fame or notoriety or whatever it is that they're seeking. All of the above.
Well, here's the button on this conversation right here. So those 3 younger people who got in the car, and I was telling this whole thing. One of the guys was like, "Man, seriously, can we listen to something other than this?" Because I just really was like, "Okay, sure." He was like, "Can we listen to the exact, like, just the complete polar opposite of Michael Jackson?" Like, sure. So I put on Prince. A guy that was notorious for his sexual prowess and for, just really being a ladies' man. And, he wrote all these songs, these sexually charged songs, everything. Not a single complaint about him.
One complaint
in almost
about him.
40 years.
Yeah.
It's like not a single complaint.
If I were his
against him.
defense attorney, I would be like, she didn't know? Ma'am, let me ask you a question. Have you heard his music?
But see, that's again. But there was
And you were
never a
surprised?
single. But there was never a sex scandal. with him,
never.
ever.
The only. I think maybe that's why he kind of behaves the way he did. This sort of far outside of the box behavior.
Right.
Prince
was just Prince.
I'm going to be.
He was just unique, and
now I'm just going to be like a sign. Now I'm going to be the artist formerly known as Prince.
Right.
Now I'm going to be like the oxygen around the symbol of the artist formerly known as Prince. I'm going to do an
I'm Prince again.
Now I'm going to do an interview, but I'm going to wear a mask, and I have to speak to the interviewer through an interpreter.
Right.
So there's no way to really prove that it is Prince. And then, like you said, now I'm just Prince. He didn't have enough actual scandal happening in his life. He actually had to create some for press.
Kevin Smith, on his An Evening with Kevin Smith DVD, there was this whole big long, it's like an hour long, of him talking about shooting a documentary at Paisley Park for Prince that never saw the light of day, But he was talking to one of like his handlers, like one of his producers or whatever that was there. And she was saying, and he tells a story that she told him. She's like, he's lived in Prince world for so long, he doesn't understand, the everyday world, And he's like, it's like just all of a sudden show up at like 3:00 in the morning. He'll be like, it's 3:00 in Minnesota or in Minneapolis, and I need a camel. And it's like, we have to try to explain to him that it's 3:00 in Minnesota. We're not getting you a fucking camel. Okay. It's like,
well, I don't remember. I don't remember who it was. It was some female. She's somebody that's known, and she was talking about. She was so excited to meet Prince. It was this after party.
Was
Prince,
it Rosie O'Donnell?
No,
talking about him.
No,
okay,
but it was.
She's got a great thing about meeting Prince.
But it's this. Prince's after parties were known. They were they were a thing to be celebrated just in and of themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
And in many cases, it was a jam session. It was a concert that was better than the actual concert in some ways. But a very relaxed atmosphere. And this girl was there, and she was like, "I'm so excited to meet Prince." Well, he's sitting over there, and he's sitting. And she said, I'm going over to him. And I'm telling myself, look, don't be the little girl that's all super excited about meeting Prince and all of that. And I got over there, and as soon as I opened my mouth, I became the little girl that I did everything that I told myself not to do.
Right.
And he was sitting there, and he was eating a bowl of macaroni and cheese. And I went through my whole spiel. I've been listening to you since I was a little girl. You're amazing. I think you're one of the best musicians out there. I love your music, and blah, 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 blah. Just going off like some chatty Cathy little girl. And then his response to her was, "This some good mac and cheese."
Yeah.
And he said it with such a straight face that I didn't know if he was saying it to like kind of help, like maybe, if I change the subject, maybe she'll calm down a little bit and we can have a conversation, or if he was just being completely sarcastic and brushing me off.
Right.
And he did it with such a straight pan that she had no idea which one it was, so she just kind of sat there and smiled for a second and then left.
Exactly. I know.
That's some good mac and cheese.
Yeah. Prince, of course we've gone way out topic here because we always do. But Prince, I remember in 1997, Okay, I think that he had just put out the Crystal Ball album, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, and this is when he was still like fighting with Warner Brothers. When he was like, when he had like written Slave on it. He stopped going by Prince. He was the symbol, and all that stuff. And he went out on what he called the Hit and Run tour. And it was also, Prince has always been famously very protective of his music and his likeness and all that kind of stuff. To the point to where like you cannot still to this day go on YouTube and find official Prince videos and stuff, and people will upload them and they'll be taken down because it's just one of those things that he's very protective about who has access to his music and everything.
There's music that's never even been released. Because there's still
they just released a new album of his stuff.
Oh, they did finally.
They did do one. They've done a couple of them since he died. But the thing is they're
because there was so much battle over his estate with all of that
because he didn't have any heirs. And it's one of those things where like he's got a couple of siblings that might get it, but they're not sure. He didn't have a will, of course. Like but it's one of those things where they conservatively say there's probably 100 albums worth of material that no one's ever heard sitting in a vault. Okay. 100 albums worth, conservatively, and with
Prince,
completely produced, completely.
With Prince, it could be music that could change the world.
Exactly,
it's but whether you like him or not.
Going back to in 1997, he's out on the Hit and Run tour, and basically what he was doing there was because he didn't want people like scalping tickets to his shows.
Yeah,
so he would basically, or he would literally like he wasn't telling people where he was going. The tickets would go on sale just a few days before the show.
Yeah,
it was literally one of those things where it was like, "Hey, I'm going to be in Nashville on Saturday.
Yeah, it's tickets a stop and rob.
Tickets go on sale on Thursday, and it's like, all right, people scramble to get it. Yeah,
and he put that out on Tuesday,
right? And it's like, and then it was
a lot of people were calling out of work,
right? Type stuff, and so it was that. It was like, anyway, what I remember the most about this is that month that he put out Crystal Ball, I remember walking into Tower Books when that was still a thing.
Yeah. Wow.
And walking over to the magazine rack, and in the music section, there were 4 magazines that were sitting there. All of them had Prince on the cover. It was guitar player, bass player, modern keyboarders, and modern drummer. All same company did all 4. Did all this.
Yeah.
Every single photo he had the instrument that was that whatever, and every interview was about that one instrument.
So he did 4 separate interviews, 4 separate photo shoots, 4 separate everything for 4 separate magazines owned by the same parent.
Pretty much.
And I bet they were all amazing articles.
That tells you everything you need to know about Prince when it comes to music.
Yeah, because he could do it all.
He did.
And most of it is self-taught.
Right. It is absolutely self-taught. You ever hear the story about how he got so good at guitar?
Yeah.
His stepdad locked him into a room for 6 weeks. Legitimately.
That's all you got.
And it's like there was a guitar in there, and he basically sat down and started listening to the radio and playing along with it.
Yep.
And it was funny because like later, like after he told that story, like a publicist came back to him and said, "Hey, do you want to amend that story? Thinking, well, maybe he doesn't want to make a stepdad." He's like, "No, it's the truth."
Yeah.
Yeah. It just like.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, at a young age, he had already had some kind of acumen for music.
Yeah.
But it was just a fact of like being locked in a room for 6 weeks with a guitar.
If I remember correctly, his dad was a pastor and his mom was like the church pianist or church organist or something like that.
His dad, his biological father was a jazz musician.
Yes.
Okay. His stepdad, I think, was
the pastor.
A pastor, that Jehovah's Witness again. And it was one of those things that, like, it's like people look at the movie Purple Rain and they're always like, oh, this is kind of a biography. It's not really.
No.
Because him and his dad actually had a really good relationship.
Yeah.
Like, his dad, like, worked with him on music and, like, I think actually played on a couple of his early albums, that kind of stuff. Helped him write and all that kind of stuff. But him and his stepdad did not have a very good relationship, and a lot of it goes back to that whole, like, when he was a kid, his stepdad literally locked him in a room for 6 weeks straight in his bedroom, and basically opened the door for him to be able to go to the bathroom or to get something to eat or whatever, and then it was right back in there again. In the room. And so he sat there for 6 weeks with a guitar and mastered the damn thing.
Started getting his chops.
And that's highly underrated guitar player.
Yeah.
Highly underrated
Well,
guitar player.
Eddie Van Halen himself had wonderful, like raving things to
a lot
say
of people
about Prince's
did. I mean,
performance. His abilities.
Yeah, and I remember I've told this story on the podcast before.
Nobody wants to talk about that.
I remember in 1984 when Purple Rain, the album, came out. And the first time I was 10 years old. First time I was listening to the radio and I heard "Let's Go Crazy." First off, I loved the song.
It's a great song.
I thought it was great. Man, this is good. And at that point, not being very knowledgeable about music and how to make it, especially as far as like it would be another 5 years before I started taking guitar lessons, and stuff. But like hearing. No, I actually started taking lessons before Lynn Peterson, but I learned a lot more with Lynn Peterson than I did.
Lynn's great player.
But it was one of those things. I remember hearing him play that solo at the end of that song, and I can hear it now. I know, and being like, this is something different than all the other stuff that I've heard like this,
See, I have a very odd. Some of it would be typical, I guess, but I have a very odd relationship with Prince's music. The first time I heard it, I appreciated it, but I kind of brushed it off for decades. The first time I ever looked forward to something from Prince was something that everybody looked forward to. It was
Batman soundtrack.
No, it was very time. What's the word I'm looking for? It's
time sensitive.
Time sensitive, because the song "We're Gonna Party Like It's 1999." And when the ball was dropping in 1999, going over to 2000, we all wanted to hear that. And of course they made that happen because there was enough public demand.
Well,
for
he
that.
Also played a concert that night.
And he played a concert.
Yeah.
I watched the concert. I did not party like it was 1999 because I wasn't really good at that yet. I mean, I hadn't quite hung around you enough by that point. I actually wasn't hanging around you that night.
Not that night, no. The next year was a whole different story.
Next year was... The next
we will
year
not speak of this on air.
You will never hear about this one on air. If we do, we're going to have to get really inventive with changing a lot of names.
Have to lawyer up like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, just triple layer at least with lawyers. But so yeah, it was the year going into 2000, and again, not to make a sad point, but it's the last time I saw one of my closest high school friends alive.
Yeah. Well, now that you brought the entire podcast down,
I'm going to go slash my wrists now.
Anyways, we are at 2 hours now as it is. So, we're going to, since we started off talking about one thing and wound up 15 different other places, it's really not that unusual.
Surprise.
If you listen to when Dave and I are on here, a lot of times we do the same thing. So, thanks for tuning in to the Project Gen X podcast. I am one of your hosts, Alan Smith. I am joined this evening by my good friend Corey.
I'll come more prepared next time.
Any social media or anything you want people to actually go to?
No, I really don't.
Anything you want to promote?
I kind of lurk here, and on occasion I show.
Corey's always trying to figure out some way to weasel his way onto the podcast. So, and he just happened to catch me at the right time tonight, and also knowing that Dave's got a lot going on at work and right now, and just cannot. And we needed another episode, so you were around. So,
and it's a wow, I feel so needed. No, it's a format that I really enjoy. I don't look at the who's listening, how many are listening. I'm sure I can ask you about that off air, but it's an interesting format. One of the things that I was telling Alan again before the show is there's a certain dynamic when he and I talk, and that dynamic, or actually that damn dynamic,
that damn nanic,
it's appropriate, is usually altered a little bit because it's not often that it's just Alan and I, and there's a certain intensity there that I really appreciate. It's really interesting, and
although
it's not to say others take away from it.
We've recorded a couple of just you and I stuff before, but it's never made air for a couple of reasons.
Yeah, and some some of it needs some editing.
And
some of it
I was like, I'm not sure where I'm going to put this exactly.
Yeah, and
I've
still got to go back. I think we did like something that was actually it turned out to be 4 hours.
Yeah,
but we have to go back.
Start talking, and it goes. And it's like, wow.
And then after the fact, I realized, you know what? There's some things in there that I'm probably, maybe based on military service or law enforcement career, that I'm probably actually not really allowed to discuss as specifically as I did, or maybe some names that I would like to edit out just to protect the innocent.
Yeah.
And but I've always, it's one of the things that I think that has kept Alan and I such close friends, other than being kindred spirits in a lot of ways, is there's an intensity there.
And you're my burden to bear, so
and and nobody else will put up with your crap as long as I have. So
it's true.
So it's truly a match made in hell.
The last person who's put up with my crap as long as you have just moved halfway around the world. So it's and I think part of it was just to get away from me.
I was going to say, and that might be why. But I will say to the folks listening, I appreciate you if you've made it this far into the end of this episode. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me. I hope you have good comments to make about me, or at least well put together snarky comments. But
and don't worry, if you have anything bad to say about Corey, I will make sure he hears every bit of it.
I will.
So
he'll tag me on Facebook. I'm sure it's about the only social media I have.
That's for old people, man.
I know, it's because I'm old. But no, I'd love to hear what you have to say about the episode. I'd love to hear what you say about me.
So, all right, guys, thank you so much for joining us here at Project Gen X Podcast. Obviously, if you go to our show notes, there are links there for the Discord, for Instagram, and even for Facebook, as well as our email address. You can get in contact with us, and we really appreciate it.
And probably some stick figure making fun of me, too.
Probably. You have no idea what the artwork for this is going to look like. So. Yeah, exactly. Now, actually, I think it's that picture of us from like 20 years ago. You know which one.
I know
which one it is.
And you know what? Before we sign off, we just need to give them a little teaser.
It was the definitive 20-something Alan and Corey. Let's just put it that way. Oh, my God, yes, Let's just put it that way. And,
there's a reason my eyes are really not open in that. I probably had half as much to drink as Alan, but I was 10 times as wasted.
And it's funny because both of us are completely wasted in that photo.
And Alan looks functional.
And I was a functional alcoholic for years, The
only reason I'm upright in that picture is because I'm holding on to Alan. I'm holding on to Alan and a door frame.
And I've got a beer in one hand and this stupid grin on my face.
And I've got the most horrible grin on my face. The only thing missing is the drool.
Yeah.
And I was gone. And I think, was that New Year's Eve going into 2001?
No, that might have been. It might have been the day that you moved in here, which was actually it was 4th of July 2000, and it was either then or it was the next party that we threw, which would have been like Labor Day.
Yeah,
it's
because that was a great reason to throw a party.
We didn't need a reason to throw a party. I was always throwing parties here.
You're the only guy I know that ever threw a President's Day party.
Yeah, I mean, just whatever.
Why? It's
going to do it. It was. Legitimately, this place was a frat house for years.
It really was.
I mean, it was for a good 4 or 5 years.
Thank God the statute of limitations has run out on everything.
Man, it's so many stories.
And I proved my worth. I'm the one that always convinced the cops to go away. So.
It's true. Corey did had his place here. So Corey was the one who was like, as he's talking to the police officers, and I come like flying out the back door completely smashed. He's like, "Go back inside now."
and the beauty of it was after he went back inside, looking at the police officers and said, "You guys didn't see that, did you?" And they're like, "Is he inside? No. Is he going to drive? No. Cool.
This is his house." I'm like, all right, that's
cool. If you guys ever need a clean bathroom, you swing by here. Just not tonight.
Right. Yeah. So anyways, guys, thank you so much. I'm Alan Smith.
And I'm Corey.
And we will see you next time.